welcome to another episode of Align with Lina. And I'm telling you, today's episode is going to light you up. And I know it will because we're going to be connecting with a beautiful young man, a soul, an incredible being of love and light who has undergone a pretty incredible journey. And it's near and dear to my heart because I can see him as a son. And as you all know, who know my story, you know I had a journey, quite an adventure with my son, my youngest son, when he went through 4 years of a drug addiction, and then we went through creating our own program to assist him in being able to move beyond that. So today the guest that I have, Ryan, is going to share with you his journey, and it's been quite the interesting journey. There's going to be a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and a lot of expanding our awareness about what addiction can lead us to. So please join me in welcoming this amazing soul. Ryan, thank you for joining me here today.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be with you, even if not in person, virtually. And I'm just excited to share a part of my journey in hopes that it allows other people to feel like their story is also important to share with others. Because as we share, it helps break down preconceived notions we have about other people. It helps us break down stereotypes. It helps us just connect with one another, which in this time right now is so vital. Connection is key to healthy mental health, and it really does do a lot of good for our souls when we can connect with people. So.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's the reason I started these interviews about 3 years ago, done over 100 and some odd of them. And it's because it gives us an opportunity to see that we're all the same. Just like me, anybody can have a journey to connecting, to aligning with source. If I can do it, anybody can. So I love to bring regular people. That's why I'm not interviewing Oprah, because everybody already knows her story. But you and I and just everyday regular people, we're going through incredible transformation. And to me, that makes it so much more real in many, many, many ways. So let me just start with the same question we start with everybody. When did you begin to realize that there was more to life than what you have been conditioned, taught, programmed, indoctrinated, whatever word you want to use? People use all of those words here. When did you realize that there was just way more than what you thought you were supposed to be, do, and have in this world?
So that's a question that can encompass my most of my whole journey and story. But honestly, I was really connected to Source, Divine, God from a really young age. I would say from 3 or 4, I felt really connected. I had a great aunt who was very, very Christian, a more conservative Christian, but through her sharing stories and sharing her faith, so it was even she didn't really have to even tell me words, but I could see her praying. I could see her love for God, and it sparked and ignited this love for God for me. But what happened is, as I realized I was a part of the LGBTQ plus community and that I was different than the people around me, I started to think, wow, God must not like me, because that's the narrative I hear around me. That's what I hear from my conservative Christian family. That's what I heard from society. That's what I heard in school. And so I turned away from my faith. I turned away from that connection with the divine. I turned away from my my God, my version of God, because my God was like, I love you, you're so great. And, just it was a different type of God than even like I was taught from my family. But then I heard that rhetoric, that talk, that, and it wasn't from everyone in my family. It was just from a couple members. And it really impacted the way I thought of myself and the way I thought of God and how I thought God didn't love me. So through that, I was led to this like self-loathing. The first time I thought about ending my own life, I was 6 years old. By the time I was 12, I was experimenting with drugs and alcohol. By the time I was 13, I was self-mutilating and cutting. By the time I was 14, I was on harder drugs more consistently. By the time I was 20, I was self-medicating to such an extent that you would be like, how are you functioning? But I was using drugs as a way to self-medicate because I
Mm-hmm.
hated myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then, crazy enough, you would think this would be the awakening experience for me, but my daughter was born. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she is amazing, by the way. But when she was
Yeah.
born, I went into a spiral, and I did the opposite of what most people would do. Most people would say, "Oh, you have a child. Like I have a child. I gotta get things in line, and I gotta get rid of these drugs, and I gotta get rid of, learn how to love myself so I can teach my daughter this." And that first year she was born, it was that spiral downward, and I started using opioids every single day. And I had this moment. I was sitting in the car. It was one day before my 23rd birthday, and I heard this song come on the radio, and I was like, if I keep doing what I'm doing, my child's going to end up in a really sad place. She's going to be without a dad, either metaphorically or literally, because I was going to end up in jail, dead on the side of the road, so addicted that I couldn't pull myself out of the addiction, or she was just going to end up without me. So I vowed that day to end all hard drugs. So I stopped all the hard drug use. And roughly a month after that, I was sitting with my drug dealer. Her name's Marie, and sat with my drug dealer, and she was telling me about her faith. She was telling me about her love for God. And I thought, wow, Marie, identifies as LGBTQ plus. She's a drug dealer and she has faith. Um, and I thought, wow, I had that faith when I was little. That feeling that you're explaining, I had when I was 3 or 4 years old, and I lost. And why did I lose it? So we talked about faith that night, and believing God, because at that point I would have self-identified as like atheist or agnostic, not even spiritual, and had this amazing conversation with her. And just, it was one of those conversations where simply she shared her story, and it inspired me to live my authentic truth, even though I was still figuring out what that was. So I went to the bathroom, I fell on my knees, and I said, God, I need you to save my life. Like I might be off hard drugs for the last month, but it is not looking pretty for me, regardless of the hard drugs or not. I was still, smoking weed and drinking every day and partying and putting myself in these unhealthy and unhappy situations. Um, so I did that. And the next morning I woke up. I ended up taking Marie to work. She was a server, so I took her to work. And on the way to work, we talked about faith. And I said, now that I believe in God, I really do. I believe again. How do I have faith? How do I hold strong to that faith? And she said, great question. This is something that a lot of, I myself have struggled with, and I think a lot of people struggle with. And I said, well, I got to figure it out and work on it. And she goes, you will. And she gave me a hug, and I gave her a kiss on the cheek, sent her into work, because she was not only my drug dealer, she was my best friend. And at one time a roommate, because her story's interesting, but it goes more into it. And in my book, My Drug Dealer Brought Me to God. But dropped her off at work, pulled out, and the one license plate in Kentucky. I live in northern Kentucky, greater Cincinnati area. And, the specialized license plate, there can only be one of each thing per
Yeah.
state. So the one license plate in Kentucky that could say faith was right in front of me.
Ah.
And I said, well, there we go. I said, not that I needed that confirmation, but in that moment I did. And it just solidified. You're on the right journey. You're on the right path. And
Oh
that's how it
my
all
God.
started. And this was 9 years ago. So I'm,
Oh wow, 9 years ago. That's amazing. So how incredible. So okay, so many things here I want to touch base on. How beautiful that your drug dealer brought you to God, brought you to faith, brought you to understanding that you don't have to be a drug user anymore to find a high, a true, natural, honest high. And I hear this really often. I've been coaching for 15 years, and I've been on my journey to faith for 20. And I knew that it wouldn't take very long before I would start helping other people, which is exactly what you're doing through the writing your book. Some of us are called into that. We begin to find a way out of the insanity, and then we want to help others find their way out as well. So thank you for listening to that voice that nudged you into that. Something that I hear often from people that I interview is that they had this knowingness as a child, of their faith, their connection. And here you have your sweet, I think you said great aunt, who is uh, a Christian. But it doesn't matter what she is modeling for you is a deep connection to that very connection you had. So you were getting validation about that was natural and normal and okay. But what happens to every single one of us, because what has come for me to teach is basically a bird's eye view of the journey. And we all go through the exact same steps. There are 6 fundamental steps from conception to enlightenment. And we all enter through the portal of conception. We all lose ourselves through the process of learning and programming and conditioning. And we all get stuck in the phase of control, where we try to control our emotions, control the outside world. And for most of us, you know what, I'm going to say for every one of us, because this is one of the things that I have become very clear about. And the more I study other people, other teachings, mine, the more I study other teachings from teachers that are my contemporaries or who've been around for thousands of years. My primary teacher is Jesus. That's who I connect with. That's who I communicate with. That's who gives me all of my teachings. Is we all go through the same process of disconnecting from God. We must go through the same process of reconnecting, realigning, aligning. That's why I call this Align with Line. That's really aligned with God. You're just sharing with me how you align with God. So that's why I call it Aligning with Laina or Align with Laina. But anyhow, everybody enters into a phase of controlling our disconnection. The pain of that disconnection is more than we can bear. Very, very few of us, very few of us have been raised with a conscious enough parent or a conscious enough great aunt or relative that helps us maintain that connection. So all of us enter into the world of the ego, the world of separation, the world of disconnection. And then we have to start those next 3 phases, which is the return. And it starts with curiosity. There's got to be another way. If we don't get curious about another way, we're stuck trying to control with the only way that we know. And Einstein said, that's the definition of insanity, doing the same freaking thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So here you are. You have this connection, you lose the connection. And for you, the loss of that connection came because you thought there was something wrong with you, that God couldn't possibly love an LGBTQ plus person. So take me to that moment, because I want to unpack that a little bit more. Here in your mind, you have, well, in your heart, you have a connection with God, but you're hearing that something about your physical body, something about your sexual orientation that you know is natural to you because it's who you are. I mean, it's the body that you carry. Take me to the mind of that child that is shifting from a faith in God, probably feeling really good about who you are, to beginning to question and doubt who you are, because that's what causes the split for all of us, whether it's through sexual orientation, through our color, our gender, financial status, through something, religion. We all go through that split, and that's the split, that's the disalignment that we are healing to bring back into connection. Because if we're not connected inside, we can't connect outside with anybody else. So please walk us through that experience. And how old were you, please?
Yeah, so I started feeling it ever since I have cognitive remembering thought. I just remember feeling different. I just felt, so my brother, who was 2 years older than me, he would do certain things. He would play certain sports and just be like naturally good at them. And I would try to play sports and I'd be like mediocre at best. Or, um, you know, certain guy friends I had would like certain things. And I wouldn't connect with that. I connected with this really right brain part of myself that was really creative and artistic and wanted to share like emotion and wanted to hear more, more kind of like in-depth conversations or be a part of those, or wanted to not, it wasn't for me the same thing that like the guys around me liked. It wasn't video games and it wasn't sports and it wasn't, cars and matchbox cars or whatever. I mean, it wasn't those things for me. It was, these things that I saw other girls doing, or females, like easy bake ovens. I loved to put the ingredients together and make something. And I came from a really loving nuclear household where like they're like, sure, you want an easy bake oven, cool, get an easy bake oven, like we support you, we love you, or you're cool, let's make something. So my nuclear family, like my mom and my stepdad and my brothers, were all really loving. And obviously at times we have our own things that come up in the journey, but especially when I was a teenager and trying to self-destruct from the self-loathing that felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that self-loathing really started as a child, and it was really a separation from feeling normal for me.
Yeah.
So
So
as
you,
I
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So I just want to insert here for those who are listening that for all of us, it starts through comparison. We compare what I'm feeling, what I'm doing versus what somebody who looks like me, who should be the way that I am supposed to be, what they're doing. And that comparison begins the process of judgment, of feeling like there's something wrong with me because I'm not like them, or there's something wrong with them because they're not like me. Either way, but anyhow, so all right, wow, how wonderful that you had that nuclear family that was so accepting.
yeah.
And take us from there. You begin the self-loathing and you were very young. You said at what age you started cutting at 13, but when did this self-loathing, because cutting, one of my children did that. Cutting comes way after you've already initiated the self-loathing, because the self-loathing starts with self-talk before it goes into self-harm. So share a little bit about the self-loathing. When did that begin for you? How old were you when you think you began to have those thoughts? Like
Well,
like you really recognize them?
really recognizing them was probably um, fifth grade. And in between fifth and sixth grade, I realized I don't want, um, I was going to a different school where most of the people in my school weren't going to the way like the district lines were. It was only like 10 kids or something from the school I went to that were going to my new school. So I said, I have a new chance. And I was hyper aware of like social structures and situations and like the cool kids, and said, I have a chance now to be well liked, and I was always seeking this affirmation from the time I was really little. And it came from that division of feeling different, but I always needed that affirmation, like, you're good, you're okay, you're doing great. And I think all kids need that, but I needed it to this like different degree, to where I was going into sixth grade and I said, well, I want people to think that I'm straight. And I want people, because I knew at that point, I was somewhere in the LGBT community. I didn't understand it fully, but I was said, I want to be like those other guys that everyone thinks are like cool and cute and the girls like. And, I'd had times growing up when I had a lot of girlfriends, in like elementary school, like really like, kindergarten to third, fourth grade. And that fourth and fifth grade were kind of rough for me. I switched schools and it was a different crew of people. And, one of the people the first day I was there were like, are you a boy or a girl? And that stuck with me because I was like, obviously I'm a boy, but just because I looked a little more feminine, and had a little bit more of a feminine mannerisms, and was more into arts and crafts and more creativity. And I was often, made fun of for that kind of thing. But it wasn't like a daily thing, but it was just like those little things that would start planting seeds in me. Like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, other boys don't get said, are you a boy or a girl? Like, that's pretty rare. I did hear, I heard it with another girl in fourth or fifth grade, and someone said the same thing to her. And I said, so then I started comparing myself to her and saying, am I like her? She seems really different than most girls, and I'm really different than most boys. Then I started comparing myself not just to boys, but to other girls and to other people and my brothers. And then it just kind of went into this spiral. And by the time I entered sixth grade, I literally went online and downloaded like the stats for every baseball player for every team. And I spent, you can imagine how long that would take. I download these stats, their batting averages or whatever. I don't even know anything about sports, but I went and downloaded them because in my mind, if I could memorize those statistics about these ball players, then I would automatically, guys would think I'm cool. I wouldn't feel like different. I would feel like a man. I would feel like a boy, you know, a boy, a man, a guy, a growing teenager boy. And I have to tell you, I downloaded them. I never once opened that it was a floppy disk back in the day, but it was like 1 or 2 floppy disks. I think it filled a whole floppy disk and a half or something. And it was a lot of information. And I was like, something clicked in me. And I was like, even if I, you know, it was a day or two before I started sixth grade, I said, even if I memorize all these facts, I'm never going to be like them. And that was really hard. So I went into sixth grade with like this bravado of like, ooh, let me do some things I know I'm not supposed to do. And let me not be the goody, the teacher's pet all the time, like I was in elementary school. And let me kind of be more adventurous. And that was where this kind of like deception of myself started, right? Like I'm not being my true authentic self even
Yeah.
more than before. You know, before I wasn't too aware of it. It was like that sixth grade moment that I realized, wow, I'm really not being me.
Well, and we have to go through that process of self-deception because that's the only way that we can create the persona that is our ego construct that has to cut, that has to numb. So the true you, the true soul that we are, basically goes to the background. If you imagine a house with multiple floors that has a basement, it's like the soul was living full out in all the floors, the primary floors. And then little by little, we begin to send it back down into the basement, into the corner. And we start to put all kinds of boxes in front of it, all these things to cover it up, to hide it with all of the self-deception until we forget that our true essence, our authentic self is stuck in a corner in the basement, which is why this journey takes such a long time. We have to descend into our deepest, darkest places to retrieve the truth of who we are. But to have that journey of returning to who we are, we first have to hide who we are, and it happens through self-deception. I was kind of chuckling when you were talking about baseball. I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and I had a professional, an uncle who was a professional ball players, and the best ball players ever come from the Dominican Republic. Just in case you didn't know that little baseball stat. But I was a massive, massive baseball fanatic. And when we live here in Atlanta, Georgia, and in the early 1990s, the Braves were the Cinderella team. And I'm telling you, I knew the stats of every player. I could tell you their batting average. I could tell you everything about them. So I absolutely chuckled with that because I loved it. And gave that up a long time ago. But anyhow, yeah, that's not easy to memorize. So here you are in sixth grade, beginning to dishonor your holy self and beginning to become who you thought you needed to be. What was that like in those middle school, high school years? Because you went into cutting, you started drugs then. What was it like starting the cutting process? Because again, I've got my daughter who went through that, and I'd like to hear from you because I only know, she had a couple of friends, but what was that like going into cutting, and why did you even start that?
Yeah. So sixth grade and seventh grade were okay. You know, I was chameleoning into whatever social group or situation. And from the outside, you'd be like, oh, you have some friends and you definitely have some girlfriends, definitely would date girls, almost all the time. And by eighth grade, I had another one of these moments where one of my cousins, she said, Ryan, you're dressing in like really baggy clothes. You're wearing like these really baggy jeans. Like, what kind of message are you sending to like not only girls, but other people that you might want to be friends with? And I was like, I don't know. And she took me to Abercrombie and Fitch, and I bought my first, like, they called it a preppy outfit. And I guess preppy can be seen as good or bad, but they were saying in a good way because they wanted me to be like Gap, Abercrombie. And I was so easily influenced because I noticed when I wore those clothes, people did look at me different than the clothes I was wearing before that were kind of like darker, like all blacks and whatever. And I, got a pair of flip-flops and I got a pair of jeans and I got a little polo and started 8th grade almost like a new version of myself. I ran for student council. To give context, I became the vice president of student council for my middle school and felt like this like acceptance that I've always been longing for the last few years in between like 4th grade and 7th grade. And that's funny because even when I felt that, that's when the cutting started. It started during that time. I had a girlfriend who was cutting and thought, well, why is she doing that? And then I started myself. And it sounds silly, but it's like those social situations you find yourself in sometimes mold you when you don't know who you are or you don't, obviously no 8th grader knows exactly who they are. But
Yeah.
I definitely was like really like not connected to any authentic pieces of me.
Yeah.
And I started cutting. And I had a lot of pain inside because of all this hiding my sexuality. By this time, I was like, oh, you're definitely in the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, I realized that way before, but it was solidified when I was like having dreams about other guys in 6th and 7th grade. And, instead of having dreams about girls or mostly, I'd have mixed dreams, but I really started being more attracted to males than females. And was really trying to figure out, like, can I just live my life like this and not tell anybody? And that created this like intense pain inside. And so the cutting, and this is a thing I hear across the board, people do it because it releases pain and it kind of releases endorphins and other chemicals in our brain. And I wasn't able to do that naturally through, like finding something I was really passionate about or getting exercise or whatever that a lot of
Yeah.
other people find that. I found it in that moment doing that thing that I thought literally a month before when one of my girlfriends was hospitalized for it. I thought, why don't I do that too? Like, I don't
Yeah.
like my life. I don't like myself. She obviously doesn't like her life and doesn't like herself is what she
Yeah.
said. And maybe it makes you feel better or something. I don't, what do I
Yeah.
do? And that's,
Well, yeah, and that does a couple of things. It diverts the attention of your inner pain to the soul pain to the physical pain. And in many ways, we actually are designed to tolerate physical pain more so than soul pain. Ask any woman who gives birth. We can tolerate some painful shit. And so, anyways, it's a diversion of the most excruciating pain is the pain of self-deception. And then you add that physical pain for a little while, you have relief from the worst pain that secondary physical pain. Now it's a piece of cake. It's not so bad, but then that begins to create its own egoic problems because it begins to give you an addiction to shift one pain to the other with this self-harm. So as you know, it's a no-win situation, but it in the mind that gets addicted to that, it makes sense. And that's what people don't understand is that it's making sense in a warped way, but it is assisting the person doing that to not feel as bad as they used to feel. And anyways, incomprehensible to one who doesn't understand what's going on inside. So then you move out of cutting and you go into the drugs. What was that transition? Why did you feel internally the need to make that transition?
yeah. So at that point, I didn't cut every day. I would say the first couple years I cut, every few months, and then it trailed off and it'd be like once a year, twice a year for until I was 19. So that's when I eventually stopped cutting. And that's a whole journey in itself. But the drugs and alcohol started right around that same time, like I would say within 4 to 6 months from the start of the cutting, I was drinking, and I had already snuck a little alcohol when I was in like 6th and 7th grade. But when I started really drinking, and I would binge drink, I went on a trip with a friend who was older than me, and his brother-in-law was like, "Yeah, I'll buy you all some alcohol." And my friend was like, I don't know, a sophomore, junior in high school, and I was in 8th grade. But obviously, that didn't matter to him. But I say that because I think it's important that as adults, we realize the decisions we make impact children. So obviously, but I think sometimes as adults, you're like, oh, I want to be the fun parent, or I want to be the fun uncle or whatever. But like, you really need to be careful, because an 8th grader, or even a sophomore, junior, or senior in high school, whatever, they're not ready for those experiences yet, to the degree at least that I experienced them. So I binge drank for 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row. From this, I bought $100 worth of alcohol, or maybe $120 or something. I bought a lot of alcohol, and we drank a lot of it, but I had some left over. But that was like my gateway into self-medicate. I felt like I could just be me. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I could just go around this party, be woo, be wild, be fun, but also like I don't have to hide who I am. Or at least at a certain point in the drinking process, I was like, oh yeah, I don't really care. I don't care about anything.
Yeah,
And then there
yeah,
are points when you black out and you don't even know what you're doing, so you can't even
totally.
keep yourself accountable.
And unlike the cutting, this is, the cutting, you've got to endure some pain. With the drinking, it's like you go into the happy place. You move beyond the physical into, like you were saying, just you don't even care. So that probably made sense. Oh, this is maybe a better way for me to not feel my discomfort and to enter into the numbing aspect. You were talking about how, um, yeah, adults, we do things not realizing how it's going to impact people. But at the same time, we have soul contracts that are always at play. And certain things that certain people do without conscious awareness are setting us up on a journey. And that is part of the recognition, a part of the part of forgiveness. We go on to forgive, because you wouldn't be able to touch the people that you are had that adult not done that thing that they did. So I always like to balance things, because if we get too much on the, watch out for what you're doing, we don't know how that's going to work out. So that's definitely an important thing. All right, so you start the drinking, and now this is consuming your life.
Yeah.
Take us to that stage of life.
Yeah, so the drugs started shortly after. So the first time I smoked weed was in between 8th grade and freshman year. Obviously hanging out with older kids that drove and stuff like that. And then the pain pills and the other types of medication, pill wise pills and different things, those popped up a few months after that. So it was like within a year, I went from, maybe having like one drink, when I was younger, wherever, to like binge drinking, to smoking weed, to sneaking out of my house, to doing pills, to, one of my first suicide attempts was within that first year. And it wasn't a conscious suicide attempt, but I purposely was mixing uppers and downers and snorted them as I was really drunk, because I knew that alcohol a lot of times increases those, both of those medications. And so I mixed them, and that was my goal. And in the moment, I didn't know that until later on when I was reflecting on my life. And I was like, wow, that was definitely my first suicide attempt. I knew what I was doing. I purposely was trying to not feel the pain, and to not feel what I was feeling, and to not be me. I said, I want to be as far away from me as I can. And if that means not on this earth, then that's okay. Um, and from there, it just kept going. I mean, and then eventually, outside of high school, the hard drug use really kind of leveled off. And I really was just self medicating with like copious amounts of marijuana, like not like a normal amount. Not that there's any normal, who knows what a normal amount is. But for me, it was like A lot. I mean, it was a lot. And when I tell people now, like how much I was smoking every day, they're like, that is an extreme amount of marijuana for one individual. And I was just medicating. I would go to school. I was in college. I somehow got good enough grades, or whatever, and made it through. And, I was always, you know, in this, like the AP classes and the advanced classes and stuff. And it would be funny. I'd walk in sometimes and people would be like, Ryan, you're in the wrong class and you don't belong here. And it was just, as silly as that sound, that even, and I made fun of it or light of it then. It was like, haha, y'all are so funny. Like, just because I'm a stoner or whatever, just because I'm a partier doesn't mean I can't be smart. But really, even that was like this like self-deception piece that I played in my world. Like, I wouldn't even own my intelligence. I wouldn't even own anything that made me feel good or look good in general, or could be a positive thing, because I literally hated myself so much. And then I was always just seeking like instant gratification and affirmation from people in ways that I thought were alluring. So to me, I didn't see being smart as like a positive, as much of as a positive as like being cool or liked, or being seen as someone that like is a partier. Like, to me, I really identified with that party like label, and thought that was like really important for me.
Yeah.
And outside of high school, then in college, like I said, I really just kind of like went inside and started like internal, as far as like I knew like, wow, you have bigger issues at play here, and let's just medicate the crap out of those with some marijuana and some drinking, of course, mixed in. But it was really weed like all day, every day. And I would steal and lie and manipulate people. Whereas like when I was growing up, it was like I was like lying or manipulating to not get caught in the things I was doing. But as an adult, I was doing it because I wanted something that I couldn't have. Like I felt, and that was really like a whole journey in itself, right? Like when you find that you're really, really disconnected from your, when I felt like I could remember that little kid in me, and I was like, you are just so, where did you get lost? Like,
Yeah.
you're a lost person in this moment, and let's just medicate the crap out of it so you don't dwell on that you feel so incomplete.
That is, oh goodness, yes. And I cannot imagine a single person who is totally numbing themselves isn't feeling that. You are so lost. Now let's just not even correct this. Let's just numb ourselves. Let's numb the pain of that disconnection, because what happens is that that distance between you and you gets wider and wider and wider and wider, and our higher self just goes further deeper down into that basement corner. It's like it's the steps. It's just steps, little by little by little by little, until we're totally completely so freaking so dark. We go so dark. We turn off our light, dim it down so much. With my son, he started right before freshman year, and he basically, his high school years were the year of this intense drug adventure. And dad and I were divorced, and I had just remarried. Stepdad was not happy about a drug addict now. He knew him as this wonderful kid that he was so happy to be his stepdad, and all of a sudden now we've got a problem in the house. And so my then husband went into basically fear that the cops were going to come, fear we were going to deal with anything that was going to stain his reputation, his image. And then Spencer's dad went into that fear. We got to fix you. We got to stop this. We got to change what you're doing. We're not under my watch. And frankly, they were really afraid of how what Spencer was doing was going to affect them. And I'm already in my journey. I'm already coaching. I'm already teaching. I'm already receiving downloads for workshops to teach about those 6 phases, how to return to ourself, which, by the way, it's a free course on my website. If you go to lineorlando.com, download it. It's called The Soul's Journey. In about an hour, it will guide you through those 6 stages, super short, but very, very impactful, so that you know where are you. And we're always kind of going around until we begin to solidify ourselves and ground ourselves a little bit more in the phases that are what I'm going to call the spiritual maturing phases, where we're gaining wisdom. But anyways, with Spencer, I was like, okay, here's a deal. He had already been in rehab. He had spent a month away in rehab. He was in 12 steps and all of those things. They were assisting, but they were not giving him any kind of, there was no motivation to give up the thing that made him feel good, no matter how much they were telling him it was bad for him and how much they would pull him away from it for a week or a month or whatever it might be. So I said to Spencer, sweetie, here, let's make a deal. You can keep doing drugs. I'm not going to tell you to take away the one thing that is the most loving thing you can do for yourself, because in the moment that you numb yourself, you're saying, I love myself enough not to feel pain. So you can keep doing that. But you've got to let me coach you. When you come out of this high, you're going to hit a low. We got to talk about this low. Why are you feeling so low? Because I gave birth to you. I know the divine being that you are. I know your brilliance and your magnificence. I know your light, and it's just been dimmed down. So you let me coach you and you keep doing your drugs. So we created a deal. And that's how we went through our 4-year journey. He would have his moments, he'd get high with his drugs, he'd come down, and we would talk about how to get his high back from his inner light, his inner being. And it wasn't easy. I'm going to tell you, as you probably know, it was not an easy journey because it was an up and down. It was a constant. We were swinging like a pendulum from one side to the other. But it was the most amazing years of my life to see somebody who had such a brilliant light, totally, completely turn his back on his light, as I'm sure, well, it's what you did. You turn your back on your light, and then you have to go through the journey to realign with that light. That's not an easy journey, because then you can't numb yourself from facing yourself. That's when you make the commitment to face your shit sober. Tell me about that part of the journey.
Yeah. So just back up a little bit. Yeah, that drug and alcohol, like I told you, when my daughter was born, you would think it'd get better, got way worse. I came out around that time. That's a whole other story for another day. But I came out and thought, oh gosh, I'm gonna be loved and accepted by this community. I'm gonna, party. I'm gonna live this life I always wanted in college, but didn't feel like, because I was so inside, like secretive with my drug use, and just like was like feeling all these things. And that's when the hard drugs hit. And
Mhm.
through that, again, and every day, I mean, it was every day for months and months. And when I got to a point where I had that message that all drug, like, you need to stop these hard drugs, I stopped, had that conversation with my drug dealer a month later. Within 3 months, had another conversation with a friend where God spoke to me and said, you need to stop all drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, pretty much any toxins entering your body. And I have a message for you, and that is that you're here to help people love and accept themselves. Funny enough, when that's your mission, you have to also learn how to love and accept yourself. So, that was about 9 years ago. And I started really, looking inside. I had that message and had that shift moment, went home and found this movie by Wayne Dyer on the shelf called The Shift,
Oh yeah.
which really just explained word for word what I just went through. And I said, yeah, this is it. And from that moment, for the next few months, everything was brighter. It was like my whole world was in HD. And like I could take off the foggy glasses, and the fog lifted, and I could really see life. And I was so appreciative, and my body started to heal. I lost 80 pounds around that time through that last, 8 months. And then, I was healthy, like I could breathe. I had asthma, and I was like, I don't need to use my inhaler anymore. I felt, I'm sure part of that's the drugs and alcohol, but part of it was like, I feel like God, the divine, gave me this like second chance at life and said, but you have a purpose and a mission. And it was really clear from the beginning that when I got those messages that I need to follow them. So for the next year, that first year into my sobriety, I fell off the wagon multiple times. I would say about once a month, I would go smoke or drink or whatever. And then I eventually had a message the last time I smoked or drank or anything. And it was pretty much just like, you're not going to be able to do the work you're going to do easily. It's going to make things more complicated if you're drinking and smoking and whatever. Like, you just, for you and your journey, not that it needs to be for everyone in their journey. I don't ever preach complete sobriety unless people are really addicts, and even then, it's everyone's situation is different, so everyone's sobriety looks different. But for me, it was like nothing at all. And as soon as I did that, all of these things opened up. I was already kind of doing these classes through the School of Metaphysics, learning how to connect to myself. The school was like this, it's a nonprofit organization and a school. I mean, I had an hour to 2 hours of homework a night for this school. Like, it was a real thing. And it was about a year-long program, and there's 4 stages, and I was in the first stage, and I learned how to meditate. I learned about world religions, about dream interpretation, about connecting to myself, about concentration and visualization. And around that same time, I was also introduced to this other hands-on meditation called oneness, which is out of India. And it's kind of morphed over the years to different things. But in the moment, it was like this hands-on group meditation. And like I said, that's a whole story for another day too, how I got there and how that was put into my life. But I really started to learn that I could heal myself and help heal others and help heal the world. And that God's message for me, my mission that I was given, was not just a journey where I could go out and give people self-love, give people self-acceptance. That for one, I had to learn how to really do that myself. And like, I'm still on that journey. I think, I think that's not a journey that that most people, I would say almost nobody ever really reaches full, because as you learn and grow, you learn more about areas where you could do better or do different, not even better, but just different, where you can realize that you still have areas to grow and develop in. And to me, that's like this process of self-love and self-acceptance and, self-esteem and self-worth and self-value. Like, these are all things that are connected, and they're connected to like this tether of always learning and growing, and at least staying open to that. And so what I realized is, as you teach people how to love themselves, if you teach people, these basic skills on like meditation and how to get connected with their divine, whatever that may be, even if they identify as atheists and that inner divine is just themselves, it's just love. I throw the God word out a lot of times, and throw the divinity and throw all of that, not out for myself, but out in conversations I have with other people. And I just say, just connect with love. Like, because to me, that love is God, and God is love, and it's all the same to me. But some people, that God, the word God itself, is just a huge trigger. I mean, my partner's one of those people. Like, he doesn't love the word God because he came from roots that really hurt him from like a Christian context. So, we use the word divine, or we use the word love, I mean, interchangeably, the divine, creator, love, oneness.
It is.
All
It
the same.
is. It is. It is. It is all the same. You could call it life. You could call it whatever. It doesn't matter what we call it. And how amazing. Yes, absolutely beautiful. There is something that has become also very clear, is that those who are being called to be in service to others, they don't grow up and have perfect lives. They all had to fall and go to the place that they got in a hole and learn how to get out of it. Because if you're not in the hole, why would you need to teach anybody how to get out of a hole that they're not in? So the teachers go into a hole, learn to come out of that hole, and then show the way to others, is what Jesus was teaching. You were talking about how people have issues with God. I grew up Catholic, and I had my issues with God. I don't like God. I mean, it's like, oh my God, this old bearded man on the cloud, like Santa Claus telling me I'm naughty or nice. I don't think so. You get no power over me. So I wanted no relationship with that. And through the journey, I was guided eventually to study A Course in Miracles. And A Course in Miracles is all about God and Holy Spirit and, all these things, salvation. I was like, oh my God, I didn't like the Bible. Now I'm reading this. But it was where I was supposed to be, because a mission that was given to me that I have been resisting until just recently is to help people fall in love with God again, with God, the word God. And even though I was told to call it GESEL for a while, which is just an acronym, GSEL, God is the source of the energy of love, it was easing me into the acceptance of what God is, because it needed me to get over my association with the word until the word means nothing. It really means nothing. It's a neutral word for me. God is love, is life, is what I am. That's why, God and the Father God and I are one. God, Father, Mother, God, whatever, it doesn't matter. And the acceptance of that power, because you were talking about, this is a journey that we're going to go on expanding forever, but actually the journey changes. It is a journey of seeking until you find, and when you find, it's a journey of releasing, of giving all that you found. So there is a moment when you realize, oh my gosh, there's nothing else for me to discover. I've arrived at that place where now I am what I am. Then the journey is all about, okay, how do I give this away? So the learning is about the realization that through the sharing, through the giving unconditionally, because there can be no condition. You haven't arrived at there's still conditions. You haven't arrived to that place where you have the awakening is that you have brought your true self out of the basement and it lives in the full freaking house. The house is lit up with the essence of who you are. Now it's about how do we take it out of the house? How do we let this light go out? Because the journey, our human journey, is about how we, snuff the light, and then this journey, the awakening, the self-awareness is where is the light? But the awakening is, no, I am the light. I know that I am, and there's no longer a doubt. And that's when what happens is what you were saying. You begin to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, which today we're in the midst of a great awakening, which is through this pandemic, through this virus, through these jabs, through all this stuff that's happening. It is all an opportunity for people to see, do you have faith? Do you have faith? Because if you have faith, you have no fear about none of that. And it is a process where many are looking at their addictions to jobs, to the government. And, so many people are addicted to safety from the government, to medicine from the outside, and avoiding that intuitive shaman that we all have inside of us that needs to be activated. So you go through your journey and you find your connection to source. You come to the place where you know that you know that you know, and you're not going to go back. You can't stuff all that light. What inspired you to write your book?
Yeah, so I had been, when I graduated my undergrad, it was like a miracle because I had been using drugs. There was a whole year I almost failed out of school because I was using drugs. That first year my daughter was born. Finished my undergrad. A couple years went by and I was really getting this message, like, go back and get your master's degree, an MBA. And I was like, oh, that sounds awful. But I went through with the guidance, and I really did what I was asked and told, what I was guided to do. And through that process, we started a nonprofit called Love Must Win. And that nonprofit really was just about helping people get to a place where they could love and accept themselves, in a place where they felt safe and welcomed just as they are. So through that process, I started doing this work in the community. And in the last about year or so, I got the message, and I started working on a book a year before that, but I really got the message, you need to step out from the nonprofit and do the work that you're going to do in the world without hiding behind the nonprofit world. And not that I won't be involved and help and volunteer, but I was the executive director for the Love Must Win for 5 years. And, during that time, by the end of it, a couple of years ago, I decided to go back and get a PhD in leadership studies. I was guided. Well, I didn't really decide. I was once again guided. And so I was like, blindly went and said, sure. And started working on work around religious trauma, which really paralleled with my story, because I said that was, I think, the base of my self-loathing, was hearing that the person that I was connected to the most, this God, the creator, divine, didn't love me because I was different, or didn't love LGBTQ people. And it just didn't feel good to me. And then so as an adult in this moment, I was like, I have to help other people that are in those similar situations. And part of that is to get education. And I'm doing my dissertation around religious trauma and post-traumatic spiritual growth.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially growth after trauma in a spiritual manner. So looking at that for LGBTQ people, hoping that it sets as a foundation for other future research around post-traumatic growth and spiritual growth, but also more looking at the LGBTQ plus community and how religion and spirituality have affected that, and how we can pull people back to some type of divinity. So that's my personal goal. And it really aligned with my book because, my drug dealer brought me to God is really about my journey. It's a hybrid between a memoir and a self-help book. So there's a 40-page workbook in it that really kind of initially digs into your trauma. And then eventually by the end, it's like half trauma based, half experience based from your childhood, from your adult life. And then it shifts to like, well, now that we examine this trauma and examine these experiences, how can we grow and learn from them and have these lessons and exercises? So there's exercises, kind of the second half of that workbook. So it's a 2-part workbook, follows along with the chapters of the book, essentially through my journey, through my spiritual awakening, through my education journey, through my nonprofit journey, through this journey of learning how to love and accept myself, and knowing that like I'm not 100% there, like I'm still working. And that's part of my journey, is that as I learn and grow about myself, then I'm able to help other people. As I keep pulling myself out of the hole, or pull myself farther up into the house, as you'd say, I'm able to really disseminate that light and help others. But I'm still kind of like in the midst of that journey of like true self-love and true self-acceptance. But I've made such huge strides from like that sub-basement level to the basement, to the first floor, to the second. And I'm still kind of working. I don't like to always look at it like a ladder, but I look at it as kind of just ascension. And as I, raise in my vibration and my awareness, I'm also able to see more about things in my life that I might, continue to work on. So the book was really pulled out from that. Like I wanted to help people on their journey. I wanted people to see that their story was important. Like no matter who you are, you have a story to share. You don't have to write a memoir. You don't have to write a book if you don't want, but you can share it with the waiter at the restaurant. You can share it with a friend that might be struggling with something. You can share it in a group, in a nonprofit, in a faith-based organization. You can share it, with a stranger on the street. Because when you share your story, I promise you, it makes impacts for people. It plants seeds. It lets people see that we all are on different paths, and that's okay. But the path is always leading to love.
Yes.
That love is the piece that unites us all. That is like this commonality in everyone's mission. No matter what your mission is, you can find how you can extract why that's a love-based mission. When you're having a true mission that you're on from the divine, that's guided, it's love. I mean, it's in the end, it's all love. So
It is. And when we realize it's love, love is life. It's the essence of if you're alive, love is wanting to extend through you. I absolutely love that, Ryan. You have, such a beautiful job of using your descent into the darkness and used it as you are rising out of that darkness, as you're expanding out of the place of such deep disconnection. You are reconnecting to the truth of who you are in a way that is so not only wonderful and beautiful, but to help others connect. I found that I had my greatest leaps the more I was teaching and helping others. And then when I realized, oh wow, I don't help anybody connect to God. I am just sharing how I connected to God, how I found my way, because we can't heal anybody. We can't make anybody whole. First of all, everybody already has that in them. It's just how did I tap into that? How did I plug back into that which is available to all of us, because it's our birthright, and you're doing it so beautifully. So if people want to find you, want to order your book, tell us about how they can connect with you.
Yeah, you can find me on ryanjosephAllen.com. Allen is Allen, or you can just go to my drug dealer broughtmetogod.com. It's going to take you to the same place, but I have both of those domains so that you can easily find me. The book, here's my proof. And
Yay!
it's like getting uploaded onto Amazon like soon, but official launch date is the 28th. So like I say soon because like today or tomorrow it could be uploaded, but the official launch, don't buy it until the launch date. But you can buy it on the 28th. It will be in a hardcover, paperback, and ebook. And I'm going to run a special on launch day between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 28th. My ebook will only be $2.99, and that will include, you can also download the workbook from my website for free. That way that you can have a printable version of it. And feel free to buy the paperback and hardcover as well, but please buy the ebook because that helps me become an Amazon bestseller. So that's what's
Yeah.
going on for that day. But I'm so excited. Like I said, my main mission here is just to share my story in a way that helps bridge people back to whatever divinity or love that they're seeking or looking for, or and then also to know that you have a story to share. Like if my drug dealer didn't share with me her story about faith, I wouldn't be in the place I am, or I might be, but I would have taken a different route or path there. Her sharing her story, just like that 2-hour conversation or hour conversation, changed my whole life. So
Wow.
don't discount your story. You have an important story to share, and please share it with people because it really does heal the world. It helps raise our vibration, and it really does bridge these gaps in all kinds of parts of life, and it really brings love to the world. So
It does. And you by sharing your journey and your mission help me accomplish my mission with these conversations aligned with Lina. You help bring a story. You shared your path. You shared so much of what has been labeled bad or wrong. You're not only are we talking about drugs, we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about cutting, we're talking about being LGBTQ plus, all of these things that we have as a society accepted, that shaming it and making it wrong was okay. And you are literally in one book, in one story, in one life, you are bringing so many things together into the place that soon we're going to drop all those labels. It won't matter what gender you are. It won't matter what color you are. Those things we use only because our ego uses them for separation and division. But it doesn't matter what your circumstances is. We're all on the same journey to self-love. We're all on the same journey to the truth of who we are. So thank you for fulfilling your mission and helping those who that particular story will resonate with them until we get to the point that there are no more stories that divide us. So thank you, beautiful soul. I am so grateful that you said yes to this interview. My life's touched by it. So thank you.
well, thank you so much. And if I can just leave you with one thing, it's
Please
really
do.
simple. It's 3 words. It's the name of our nonprofit that we started years ago, but it's love must win.
Mhm.
Period. Thanks.
Yes. Yes. Well, I know that love definitely has already won because we are all feeling the call towards it. So thank you so much. And I will bring more interviews, and you can just keep checking in. Align with Lina on Mondays at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Keep bringing people who will inspire you, because just as we have done the work that we have to realign with source within us, whatever you want to call it, anybody can. Thank you so much and have a magnificent day.